Sarah Martinez had heard those words countless times throughout her 15-year nursing career. Just a nurse. The phrase always stung, but she had learned to let it roll off her shoulders like water off a duck's back. At 38 years old, she had seen enough life and death situations to know that her role was far more important than most people realized. The morning of October 15th started like any other Tuesday at St. Mary's General Hospital. Sarah arrived at 6:45 a.m., 15 minutes before her shift began, clutching her usual large coffee from the cafe down the street. The emergency department was already buzzing with activity. 2 ambulances had arrived during the night shift, bringing in patients from a car accident on the interstate. "Morning, Sarah," called out Dr. Peterson as he rushed past with a chart in his hand. "We've got a full house today." Sarah nodded and headed to the nurse's station to get her assignment for the day. The charge nurse, Linda, handed her a clipboard with patient information. "You've got rooms 4 through 8 today. Mrs. Johnson in room 6 is asking for you specifically. She says you're the only one who can find her veins for blood draws." This was typical for Sarah. Patients often requested her because she had a gentle touch and a way of making even the most anxious people feel calm. Her colleagues sometimes joked that she had magic hands, but Sarah knew it was just years of practice combined with genuine care for her patients. Room 4 held a teenage boy who had broken his arm during football practice. His mother sat beside the bed, wringing her hands with worry. "The doctor said they need to set the bone," the mother explained to Sarah. "Will it hurt much?" Sarah pulled up a chair and sat down at eye level with the boy. "What's your name, honey?" "Tyler," the boy mumbled, clearly trying to act tough despite the pain. "Well, Tyler, I'm not going to lie to you. It might hurt a little when they set your arm, but we're going to give you some medicine to help with the pain, and I'll be right here with you the whole time, okay?" Tyler nodded, and his mother squeezed Sarah's hand gratefully. This was what Sarah loved most about her job, being there for people during their scariest moments. By noon, Sarah had already dealt with a heart attack patient, helped deliver a baby whose mother couldn't make it to the maternity ward in time, and assisted in treating a construction worker who had fallen from scaffolding. Her feet ached, but she barely noticed. This was just another day in the life of just a nurse. During her lunch break, Sarah sat in the hospital cafeteria with her friend Jenny, another nurse from the pediatric ward. "Did you hear about what happened at City General last week?" Jenny asked, lowering her voice. "No, what happened?" "There was some kind of incident in their emergency room. A man came in acting strange, apparently high on something. He started threatening people and the police had to come. Took them hours to calm him down." Sarah shook her head. "That's scary. We deal with difficult patients sometimes, but nothing like that." "Makes you think, though," Jenny continued. "We're trained to handle medical emergencies, but what about other kinds of situations? Sometimes I feel like we're expected to be everything to everyone. Medical expert, counselor, security guard, you name it." Sarah had never thought about it that way, but Jenny was right. Nurses were often the first line of defense in hospitals. They were the ones patients saw first, the ones they trusted with their fears and concerns. When something went wrong, nurses were expected to handle it until help arrived. After lunch, Sarah returned to her rounds. Mrs. Johnson in room 6 was indeed difficult to draw blood from, but Sarah managed it on the first try, earning a grateful smile from the elderly woman. "You have a gift, dear," Mrs. Johnson said. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The afternoon brought its own challenges. A child with a severe allergic reaction came in, requiring immediate attention. Sarah worked alongside Dr. Chen to stabilize the little girl while her parents waited anxiously in the hallway. The child's breathing improved after the medication took effect, and Sarah stayed with the family to explain what had happened and what to watch for in the future. "Thank you so much," the mother said through tears. "You saved her life." Sarah squeezed the woman's hand. "We all work together. That's what we do here." As her shift neared its end, Sarah reflected on the day. She had been called just a nurse twice, once by an impatient family member who wanted to speak to a real doctor, and once by an administrator who was discussing budget cuts. Each time, Sarah had simply continued doing her job with professionalism and grace. But the truth was, Sarah was far from just anything. She had a bachelor's degree in nursing, had completed additional training in emergency care, and was certified in advanced life support. She had delivered babies, helped save lives during cardiac arrests, and provided comfort to countless families during their darkest hours. More importantly, Sarah had something that couldn't be taught in any classroom: instinct. She could sense when a patient was hiding their pain, when a family member needed extra support, or when a situation was about to turn dangerous. This instinct had served her well over the years, helping her provide better care and catch problems before they became serious. As Sarah gathered her things to leave for the day, she had no idea that this instinct would soon be put to the ultimate test. Tomorrow would bring a situation unlike anything she had ever faced. One that would prove once and for all that there was nothing just about being a nurse. The evening sun cast long shadows across the hospital parking lot as Sarah walked to her car. She was tired but satisfied with the day's work. Another shift completed, more lives touched and helped. She had no way of knowing that in less than 24 hours, the phrase "just a nurse" would take on an entirely different meaning, not as a dismissal of her importance, but as a testament to the extraordinary courage and skill that nurses possess. Tomorrow would change everything for Sarah Martinez, and for everyone who had ever underestimated the power of just a nurse. Wednesday morning arrived with an unusual heaviness in the air. Sarah noticed it the moment she stepped out of her apartment building. The weather forecast had called for storms later in the day, and the sky already showed signs of the approaching front. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, creating an ominous backdrop for what would become the most important day of Sarah's career. At the hospital, the emergency department seemed busier than usual for a Wednesday. Sarah checked in with Linda at the nurses' station and learned that they were short-staffed again. 2 nurses had called in sick, and another was dealing with a family emergency. "We're going to need everyone to step up today," Linda explained, handing Sarah her patient assignments. "I know it's a lot to ask, but you're one of our strongest nurses. Can you handle an extra load?" Sarah nodded without hesitation. "Of course. What do you need me to do?" This was typical for Sarah. She never complained about extra work or difficult assignments. Her colleagues had come to rely on her steady presence and willingness to help wherever needed. Dr. Peterson often said that Sarah was the backbone of their emergency department, though he had never said it directly to her. The morning started with a rush of patients. A cooking accident had sent a woman to the emergency room with severe burns on her hands and arms. Sarah worked carefully to clean and dress the wounds while explaining to the patient's husband what the treatment would involve. "Will she be able to use her hands normally again?" the husband asked, his voice shaking with worry. Sarah looked at the burns carefully. They were serious but not devastating. With proper care and physical therapy, she should recover most of the function in her hands. "Burns like these take time to heal, but your wife is young and healthy. That works in her favor." The woman squeezed Sarah's hand with her uninjured fingers. "Thank you for being honest with us. Some people just tell you what they think you want to hear." This was something Sarah had learned early in her career. Patients and families needed the truth, delivered with compassion but without false hope or unnecessary fear. It was a delicate balance that required both medical knowledge and emotional intelligence. By mid-morning, the emergency department was handling its usual mix of cases. A construction worker had cut his hand with a saw and needed stitches. An elderly man was experiencing chest pains that turned out to be heartburn rather than a heart attack, much to his family's relief. A mother brought in her toddler who had swallowed a small toy, requiring careful monitoring to ensure it would pass through safely. During a brief break between patients, Sarah overheard a conversation between 2 police officers who were in the hospital following up on a case from the previous night. "Things are getting stranger out there," one officer was saying to his partner. "People seem more on edge lately. We've had 3 domestic disturbance calls this week alone, and it's only Wednesday." "Tell me about it," the other officer replied. "And half the time we get called to situations that started in hospitals or clinics. People get bad news about their health or they can't afford their treatment and they just snap." Sarah found this conversation troubling, but pushed it to the back of her mind. She had work to do and patients to care for. Still, something about the officer's words stuck with her. She had noticed that patients seemed more stressed and angry lately. Economic pressures, family problems, and health issues were creating a perfect storm of tension for many people. Around noon, Sarah was helping Dr. Chen with a patient who had been in a minor car accident when she heard raised voices coming from the waiting area. This wasn't unusual. People in emergency rooms were often frustrated, in pain, or worried about loved ones. But something about these voices sounded different. more aggressive, more dangerous. I'll go check on that, Sarah told Dr. Chen, stepping out of the treatment room. In the waiting area, she saw a man in his 30s arguing with the receptionist at the front desk. He was tall and thin, wearing dirty jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt. His hair was messy and his eyes had a wild look that immediately put Sarah on alert. "I've been waiting for 3 hours," the man was shouting. "3 hours? And you keep telling me the doctor will see me soon. I'm in pain here." The receptionist, a young woman named Amanda who had only been working at the hospital for a few months, looked scared. "Sir, I understand your frustration, but the doctors have to see the most urgent cases first. Your injury isn't life-threatening, so how do you know?" the man interrupted, his voice getting louder. "You're not a doctor. You don't know anything." Sarah approached the desk calmly. She had dealt with angry patients before, and knew that the key was to remain composed and listen to their concerns. "Hi there," she said to the man with a gentle smile. "I'm Sarah, one of the nurses here. Can you tell me what's going on?" The man turned to look at her, and Sarah immediately noticed that his pupils were dilated. His hands were shaking slightly, and he was sweating despite the cool temperature in the hospital. These were signs that he might be under the influence of drugs or experiencing some kind of medical crisis. "Finally, someone who might actually help," the man said, though his tone remained hostile. "I hurt my back at work 2 days ago, and the pain is getting worse. I can't sleep, I can't work, and these people keep telling me to wait." Sarah nodded sympathetically. "Back pain can be really difficult to deal with. Let me see what I can do to get you seen more quickly." "What's your name?" "Marcus," the man replied, though he didn't seem to relax much. "Okay, Marcus. Let me talk to the triage nurse and see where you are on the list. Sometimes we can move things around if someone is in significant pain." Sarah knew that Marcus's case wasn't an emergency, but she also recognized that he was becoming increasingly agitated. Sometimes the best approach was to give people hope that their situation would improve soon. It was a balancing act between managing patient flow and preventing situations from escalating. She spoke quietly with the triage nurse and learned that Marcus would likely be seen within the next hour. When she returned to tell him this, she noticed that he seemed even more agitated than before. He was pacing back and forth in front of the desk, muttering to himself. "Marcus," Sarah said gently, "the good news is that you should be seen in about an hour. I know that seems like a long time, but an hour?" Marcus exploded. "I can't wait another hour. I need help now." Other patients in the waiting room were starting to look nervous. Parents pulled their children closer, and elderly patients moved to seats farther away from Marcus. Sarah realized that this situation could escalate quickly if she didn't handle it properly. "I understand how frustrating this must be," Sarah said, keeping her voice calm and steady. "Is there anything I can do to help you feel more comfortable while you wait? Maybe we can find you a quieter place to sit, or I could get you some information about managing back pain." But Marcus wasn't listening anymore. His agitation had reached a point where reason wasn't getting through. Sarah's nursing instincts kicked in, and she began to see this situation not just as a customer service issue, but as a potential medical emergency. Marcus's behavior suggested he might be having a reaction to medication, illegal drugs, or even a mental health crisis. What Sarah didn't know was that Marcus had much more serious problems than back pain. Problems that would soon turn this ordinary Wednesday into a day that would test every skill she had learned in her 15 years as a nurse. Marcus's behavior continued to deteriorate over the next 20 minutes. Sarah watched him from the nurse's station, noting how he kept checking his phone and looking toward the exits. His pacing had become more frantic and he was talking to himself more frequently. These were red flags that Sarah had learned to recognize during her years of emergency nursing. "Linda," Sarah said quietly to the charge nurse, "I think we might have a problem with the patient in the waiting room. The one who's been complaining about his back." Linda looked up from her computer screen. "Marcus Williams? What kind of problem? His behavior is escalating. I'm wondering if there's more going on than just back pain. His pupils are dilated, he's sweating, and he seems really agitated. I think we should consider having security take a look or maybe move him somewhere less crowded." Linda frowned. "We can't move patients around just because they're upset. The waiting room is where they wait. If he becomes truly disruptive, we'll call security then." Sarah understood Linda's position, but her instincts were telling her that waiting might be a mistake. In her experience, situations like this could go from manageable to dangerous very quickly. However, as just a nurse, her concerns weren't always taken as seriously as they should be. She decided to keep a close eye on Marcus while continuing with her other duties. Her next patient was an elderly woman who had fallen at home and possibly broken her hip. As Sarah helped the woman get comfortable and prepared her for x-rays, she could hear Marcus's voice getting louder in the waiting room. "This is ridiculous," Marcus was shouting. "I know my rights. You can't keep me waiting forever." The x-ray technician, a young man named David, looked concerned. "Should we call someone about that guy?" "I've already mentioned it to the charge nurse," Sarah replied. "Let's focus on Mrs. Garcia for now, but keep your ears open." Mrs. Garcia, the elderly patient, squeezed Sarah's hand. "That man sounds very angry. Is it safe here?" Sarah gave her a reassuring smile, though she was feeling increasingly uneasy herself. "You're safe, Mrs. Garcia. We have security in the hospital and there are lots of staff members around. Let's get these x-rays done so the doctor can see what's going on with your hip." As they wheeled Mrs. Garcia to the x-ray room, Sarah caught sight of Marcus again. He was now standing directly in front of the reception desk, pointing his finger aggressively at Amanda, the young receptionist. Sarah could see that Amanda was close to tears. "I need to check on something," Sarah told David. "Can you handle Mrs. Garcia for a few minutes?" David nodded and Sarah hurried back toward the waiting room. As she got closer, she could hear more of Marcus's words, and what she heard made her blood run cold. "You people think you're so much better than everyone else," Marcus was saying, his voice filled with rage. "Sitting there in your safe little hospital looking down on people like me. Well, I've had enough of being treated like garbage." Sarah noticed that Marcus kept reaching toward his back pocket, as if checking for something. This behavior, combined with his increasingly threatening language, set off every alarm bell in her head. She had seen enough crime shows and attended enough safety training sessions to know that someone reaching for their back pocket repeatedly could be a sign they were armed. She approached the reception desk slowly, trying not to escalate the situation. "Marcus," she said in her calmest voice, "I have some good news. I talked to the doctor and we're going to get you seen right away. Why don't you come with me?" Marcus spun around to face her, and Sarah could see that his eyes were not just dilated but completely wild. Whatever substances he had taken, they were affecting his judgment and self-control severely. "Don't lie to me," Marcus snarled. "You're just like the rest of them. You think I'm stupid. You think you can placate me with your fake nurse smile and your lies?" "I'm not lying, Marcus," Sarah said, maintaining eye contact. "I really do want to help you. But I need you to calm down so we can talk about what's bothering you." "What's bothering me?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "What's bothering me is that nobody in this place cares about people like me. You only care about people with good insurance and clean clothes." Sarah could see other staff members starting to notice the commotion. Dr. Peterson appeared at the edge of the waiting room, and she caught his eye. He nodded slightly, indicating that he was aware of the situation. "That's not true, Marcus," Sarah said. "We care about every patient who comes through those doors, rich or poor, insured or uninsured. That's why we became healthcare workers." "Healthcare workers," Marcus repeated mockingly. "You mean like the healthcare workers who turned me away from 3 other hospitals because I don't have insurance? You mean like the healthcare workers who treated me like a drug addict when I asked for pain medication?" Sarah began to understand that Marcus's anger went deeper than just waiting too long in the emergency room. He had clearly had bad experiences with the healthcare system before, and those experiences had built up into a rage that was now being fueled by whatever drugs he had taken. "I'm sorry that happened to you," Sarah said, and she meant it. "That's not right, and it's not how things should work. But we can make this experience different. Let me help you." For a moment, Marcus seemed to consider her words. His hand stopped reaching for his back pocket, and his breathing slowed slightly. Sarah thought she might be getting through to him. Then his phone rang. Marcus answered it quickly, and Sarah could hear an angry male voice on the other end, though she couldn't make out the words. Whatever the caller was saying, it was making Marcus even more agitated. "I don't care," Marcus shouted into the phone. "I'm done playing games. These people are going to listen to me one way or another." He hung up the phone and shoved it into his front pocket. Then, slowly and deliberately, he reached toward his back pocket again. This time, Sarah could see the outline of something that made her heart stop. It was the unmistakable shape of a gun. Sarah felt time slow down as her training kicked in. She had never been in a situation like this before, but years of dealing with medical emergencies had taught her to think clearly under pressure. She knew that panic would only make things worse. "Marcus," she said, her voice still calm despite the fear coursing through her body. "I can see that you're really upset. Whatever is in your pocket, you don't need it here. We're going to take care of you." Marcus's hand froze halfway to his back pocket. He looked at Sarah with surprise, as if he hadn't expected her to notice what he was reaching for. "You don't know anything about what I need," Marcus said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. "You don't know what it's like to be ignored and dismissed and treated like you don't matter." "You're right," Sarah said, taking a small step closer. "I don't know exactly what that's like, but I do know what it's like to be called just a nurse and have people act like your job doesn't matter. I know what it's like to feel like no one is listening to you." For the first time since Sarah had encountered Marcus, he seemed to really see her as a person rather than just another hospital employee. His hand dropped away from his back pocket, and he tilted his head slightly, as if considering her words. It was in that moment of connection that Sarah realized she might be the only thing standing between Marcus and a tragedy that could affect dozens of innocent people. The waiting room had gone deadly quiet. Other patients sensed the tension, even if they didn't understand exactly what was happening. Parents held their children closer, elderly patients gripped their chairs, and everyone seemed to be holding their breath. Sarah was acutely aware that 37 people were in the waiting room, including 6 children under the age of 10. "Just a nurse," Marcus repeated Sarah's words slowly. "Yeah, I bet they do say that to you. Just like they say I'm just another drug addict looking for pills, just another poor person taking up space." Sarah nodded, maintaining eye contact. "It hurts when people dismiss you, doesn't it? When they act like you don't have value or that your problems don't matter." "Every single day," Marcus said. And for the first time, Sarah heard pain in his voice instead of just anger. "Every single day someone treats me like I'm nothing. Like I'm garbage." Sarah could see Dr. Peterson slowly moving closer, staying along the wall where Marcus couldn't see him. She also noticed that Amanda, the receptionist, had pressed something under her desk, probably an emergency alert button. Help would be coming, but Sarah knew that when security or police arrived, this situation could escalate quickly. She needed to keep Marcus talking and calm until then. "Tell me about your back injury," Sarah said, taking another small step closer. "What happened at work?" Marcus seemed surprised by the question. "You really want to know?" "Yes, I do. Work injuries can be really serious, and sometimes people don't take them seriously enough." "I work construction," Marcus said, his hand still hovering near his back pocket but not reaching for it. 2 days ago I was carrying a beam and my partner let go without warning me. The whole weight fell on my back and I went down hard. "That must have been terrifying," Sarah said, "and painful. I couldn't get up for 10 minutes. My supervisor said I was faking it, told me to walk it off. But the pain kept getting worse, so I went to the clinic near the job site." "What happened there?" Marcus's expression darkened again. "The doctor there took one look at me, my work clothes, my calloused hands, and decided I was just looking for drugs. He barely examined me, told me to take some over-the-counter pain relievers and get back to work." Sarah felt a surge of anger on Marcus's behalf. She had seen this kind of discrimination in healthcare before, and it was one of the things that made her most frustrated about the system. People judged patients based on their appearance, their insurance status, or their background, and it led to inadequate care. "That's not right," Sarah said firmly. "You deserve better care than that." "Then I went to 2 other hospitals," Marcus continued. "Same thing at both places. They saw a construction worker asking for pain medication and assumed I was lying. Nobody took x-rays, nobody did any real examination. They just wanted to get rid of me." "And that's how you ended up here?" "This was my last hope," Marcus said, his voice cracking slightly. "If you people can't help me, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't work with this pain, and if I can't work, I can't pay rent. If I can't pay rent, I'm homeless." Sarah was beginning to understand the full picture. Marcus wasn't just angry about waiting in the emergency room. He was facing the complete collapse of his life, and he felt like no one in the medical system cared enough to help him. The drugs he had taken, probably something to numb the pain or calm his anxiety, had amplified his desperation into rage. "Marcus, I promise you that we're going to help you today," Sarah said. "We're going to do a proper examination, get x-rays if we need them, and figure out what's wrong with your back." "You're just saying that to calm me down," Marcus replied. But there was less conviction in his voice. "No, I'm not. Look at me, Marcus. I've been a nurse for 15 years and I've never lied to a patient about their care. I'm not going to start now. Marcus studied her face, searching for any sign of deception. Sarah met his gaze steadily, letting him see the sincerity in her eyes. How do I know you have the authority to make that promise? Marcus asked. You're just a nurse. You're right, Sarah said. I am just a nurse. But you know what that means? It means I'm the person who spends the most time with patients. I'm the person who sees everything that happens in this emergency room. And when I tell a doctor that a patient needs immediate attention, they listen to me. As if on cue, Dr. Peterson stepped forward from where he had been waiting along the wall. Sarah's absolutely right, he said in a calm, professional voice. Sarah is one of our most experienced nurses, and when she says a patient needs to be seen right away, we make it happen. Marcus spun around, startled by the doctor's sudden appearance. His hand moved toward his back pocket again, and Sarah's heart rate spiked. Marcus, Sarah said quickly, drawing his attention back to her. This is Dr. Peterson. He's the one who's going to examine your back and figure out how to help you. I don't want more doctors, Marcus said, his agitation rising again. Doctors have been lying to me all week. Dr. Peterson held up his hands in a peaceful gesture. I understand your frustration, Marcus. Sarah told me about what you've been through, and I want you to know that it's not acceptable. You deserve proper medical care regardless of your insurance status or your job. Prove it, Marcus challenged. We will, Dr. Peterson said. But first, I need you to do something for me. I need you to remove whatever you have in your back pocket and place it on the floor. Then we can focus on helping you without anyone feeling unsafe. Marcus's eyes darted between Sarah and Dr. Peterson. Sarah could see him struggling with a decision. Part of him wanted to believe that they would help him, but another part was too angry and desperate to trust anyone. If I do that, Marcus said slowly, how do I know you won't just call security and have me arrested? Because, Sarah said, stepping closer, we're healthcare workers, not police officers. Our job is to help people, not to arrest them. If you're willing to let us help you, we're willing to forget about everything that happened before Dr. Peterson examines you. Marcus looked around the waiting room, seeming to notice for the first time how scared the other patients looked. A little girl was crying quietly in her mother's arms, and an elderly man was clutching his chest as if he was having trouble breathing from stress. I didn't mean to scare anyone, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. I just hurt so much and no one would listen. We're listening now, Sarah said gently, and we're going to help. But first you need to show us that you trust us to keep our word. Marcus stood frozen for a long moment, his internal struggle playing out on his face. Sarah could hear sirens in the distance, growing closer. Security or police were definitely on their way, which meant this situation was about to reach a critical point. She had to make a choice. She could step back and let the authorities handle Marcus when they arrived, or she could take a risk and try to reach him before the situation escalated beyond anyone's control. Sarah made her decision. She took another step toward Marcus, close enough now that he could easily grab her if he wanted to. Marcus, she said, her voice steady and calm, I'm going to trust you not to hurt me, and I need you to trust me to keep my promise. Can you do that? The sirens were getting louder. Sarah estimated that police or security would arrive within the next 2 minutes. She could see the fear in Marcus's eyes as he also heard the approaching sounds. His desperation was about to turn into panic, and panic could make him do something that would destroy multiple lives. They're coming for me, aren't they? Marcus said, his voice shaking. You called the police. Hospital security was called when you started acting aggressively, Sarah said honestly. But Marcus, you still have time to make this right. You can choose how this ends. Marcus's hand hovered over his back pocket, trembling. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted someone to help me. I just wanted someone to see that I'm a human being who deserves basic respect. I see you, Sarah said, extending her hand toward him. I see a man who's in pain, who's been treated badly, and who's scared about his future. I see someone who deserves help. Tears began to form in Marcus's eyes. Nobody has said that to me in months. Nobody has looked at me like I'm actually a person. The sound of running footsteps echoed down the hospital corridor. Sarah knew they had seconds before the situation would be taken out of her hands. She made a decision that would either save lives or put herself in incredible danger. She stepped within arm's reach of Marcus. Give me your hand, she said, holding hers out. Let me help you. Marcus stared at her outstretched hand. Behind him, Sarah could see security guards approaching the waiting room entrance, but they had stopped when they saw how close she was to Marcus. They were trained not to escalate situations where a civilian was in potential danger. You're not afraid of me, Marcus said with wonder. I'm afraid of what might happen if we don't trust each other right now, Sarah replied. But I'm not afraid of you as a person. I've seen pain make people do desperate things, but I've also seen that same pain create compassion and connection. Marcus looked at her hand, then at her face, then around the waiting room at all the frightened people. The little girl had stopped crying and was watching them with wide eyes. The elderly man was breathing more steadily, though he still looked worried. If I give you my hand, Marcus said slowly, what happens next? Next, you remove whatever is in your pocket and place it on the floor. Then Dr. Peterson examines your back. We get you the pain relief you need, and we start treating you like the human being you are. And the police? Sarah glanced toward the security guards who were speaking quietly into their radios. That depends on you. If you choose cooperation over confrontation, we can work with the authorities to focus on getting you help rather than punishment. Marcus followed her gaze to the security guards. There are a lot of them. There are, Sarah agreed. But right now, the most important person in this room is you. You get to decide whether this ends with everyone safe and you getting the medical care you deserve, or whether it ends with tragedy for everyone. The weight of that responsibility seemed to settle on Marcus's shoulders. He looked once more at the frightened faces around the waiting room, and Sarah could see the moment when his anger transformed into something else: regret, determination, and hope. I don't want to hurt anyone, Marcus said quietly. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I know you don't, Sarah said. So let's make sure that doesn't happen. Marcus slowly reached out and took Sarah's hand. His palm was sweaty and rough from construction work, and she could feel how badly he was shaking, but his grip was gentle, not threatening. Okay, Marcus said. I trust you. With his free hand, Marcus slowly reached into his back pocket. Sarah's heart pounded as she watched him carefully extract a small black object. For a terrifying moment, she thought it might actually be a gun, but as he brought it into view, she saw that it was a cell phone in a black protective case. Sarah felt a wave of relief so strong that her knees almost buckled. All this time, the threatening object she had been worried about was just a phone. But then Marcus reached deeper into his pocket and her relief vanished as quickly as it had come. This time what he pulled out was unmistakably real, a small black handgun. The waiting room erupted in gasps and screams. Parents grabbed their children and tried to move toward the exits. But the security guards quickly blocked the doorways to prevent a stampede that could cause more injuries. Everyone stay calm, Dr. Peterson called out in his most authoritative voice. Nobody move suddenly, everything is under control. But Sarah could see that everything was far from under control. Marcus was now holding a loaded weapon, and despite his promise to trust her, the sight of the gun had changed the entire dynamic of the situation. Marcus, Sarah said, her voice somehow remaining steady despite the terror coursing through her body. I need you to put that down, right now. I can't, Marcus said, his voice breaking. If I put it down, they'll arrest me. I'll lose my job, my apartment, everything. I'll end up on the street. If you don't put it down, much worse things will happen, Sarah said firmly. People could get hurt. You could get hurt. This doesn't have to end that way. The security guards were speaking urgently into their radios, calling for backup and probably police tactical units. Sarah knew that once armed police arrived, this situation would escalate rapidly. Trained officers would not be as patient as she had been. They would demand immediate surrender, and if Marcus didn't comply instantly, the results could be deadly. She had maybe 30 seconds to resolve this before the situation spiraled completely out of control. Marcus, look at me, Sarah said, squeezing his hand tighter. Look at my eyes. Marcus turned his gaze from the security guards back to Sarah. She could see the panic and desperation in his expression, but she could also see that he was still listening to her. You told me you never wanted to hurt anyone, Sarah said. I believe you. But right now, every second you hold that gun, you're hurting everyone in this room, including yourself. I know, Marcus whispered. But I'm so scared I don't know what to do. I do, Sarah said with confidence she didn't entirely feel. You're going to slowly bend down and place that gun on the floor. Then you're going to kick it away from both of us. Then you're going to put your hands up and show everyone that you're not a threat. And then what happens to me? Sarah took a deep breath. She was about to make promises she wasn't sure she could keep, but she knew they were the only chance of ending this peacefully. Then I'm going to stand right beside you when the police get here. I'm going to tell them that you cooperated, that you chose to do the right thing, and that you need medical help, not just punishment. I'm going to make sure they know that you're a human being who deserves to be treated with dignity. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. You would do that? Even after I scared everyone? Even after I brought a gun into a hospital? Yes, Sarah said without hesitation. Because I'm a nurse, and nurses don't give up on people, even when those people make mistakes, even when they're scared and desperate and make bad choices. The sound of police sirens was now very close. Sarah estimated they had less than a minute before armed officers entered the building. Marcus, we're out of time, she said urgently. You have to decide right now. Trust me or lose everything. Marcus looked around the waiting room one more time. He saw the frightened children, the worried parents, the elderly patients who just wanted to be safe. He saw Dr. Peterson, who had promised to help him, and he saw Sarah, who had risked her own safety to treat him like a human being. Okay, Marcus said, his voice barely audible. I trust you. What happened next took exactly 7 seconds, though it felt like hours to everyone watching. Marcus slowly released Sarah's hand. He crouched down carefully, placed the gun on the floor and used his foot to slide it several feet away from where they were standing. Then he straightened up and raised both hands above his head. I surrender, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. I don't want to hurt anyone, I surrender. The tension in the waiting room broke like a snapped wire. Some people began crying with relief. Others started talking in hushed, rapid voices. The security guards moved quickly to secure the weapon while keeping their eyes on Marcus. Sarah stepped closer to Marcus, positioning herself slightly between him and the security guards. You did the right thing, she told him quietly. I'm proud of you. And in that moment, as police officers began entering the hospital and Marcus prepared to face the consequences of his actions, Sarah realized that she had just proven something important. She wasn't just a nurse. She was exactly the kind of nurse the world needed, one who could see the humanity in everyone, even in their darkest moments. The next few hours passed in a blur of police interviews, incident reports, and medical evaluations. True to her promise, Sarah stayed with Marcus throughout the entire process. She spoke to the arresting officers, explaining how Marcus had cooperated and surrendered voluntarily. She accompanied him to the treatment room where Dr. Peterson conducted a thorough examination of his back injury. The x-rays revealed what Sarah had suspected all along. Marcus had a severely herniated disc that was pressing on his spinal nerves. The injury was real, significant, and would have been obvious to any doctor who had taken the time to do a proper examination. This level of injury would cause excruciating pain. Dr. Peterson explained to the police officers who were waiting to take Marcus to jail. He wasn't seeking drugs for recreational use. He was in genuine medical distress. Sarah watched as they fitted Marcus with a back brace and gave him prescription pain medication, the help he had been seeking for 3 days. Even with handcuffs on his wrists, Marcus looked more relaxed than he had since Sarah first encountered him. I'm sorry, Marcus said to Sarah as the officers prepared to escort him out. I'm sorry for scaring everyone. I'm sorry for putting you in danger. I didn't know what else to do. I know, Sarah replied, and I'm going to make sure people understand that when you go to court, you're going to get help for your back and for whatever led you to feel so desperate that you thought bringing a gun to a hospital was your only option. As promised, Sarah spent the following weeks advocating for Marcus. She testified at his hearing about his cooperation and surrender. She helped connect him with social services that could assist with his medical bills and housing situation. She even visited him twice while he was serving his reduced sentence, checking on his recovery and making sure he was getting proper medical care. The incident made local news, though the headlines focused more on the peaceful resolution than on the initial threat. Local nurse talks down armed man in hospital standoff, read one article. 7-second surrender saves lives at St. Mary's, read another. But for Sarah, the real story wasn't about the dramatic 7 seconds when Marcus put down his weapon. It was about the longer story of what had led to that moment. The systemic failures that had left an injured man feeling so desperate that he saw violence as his only option. And the power of human connection to overcome even the most frightening situations. In the days following the incident, Sarah was surprised by the attention she received. Hospital administrators wanted to meet with her. Local news stations requested interviews. The mayor's office called to discuss a possible commendation. "I don't understand what all the fuss is about," Sarah told her friend Jenny over lunch a week later. "I just did my job." "Sarah," Jenny said, shaking her head, "most people would have run away or called for backup the moment they saw that gun. You stayed and talked him down. You probably saved lives." "Any nurse would have done the same thing," Sarah insisted. "No," Jenny replied firmly. "Any nurse wouldn't have. What you did required incredible courage and skill. You saw a person in crisis and you responded with compassion instead of fear." As word of the incident spread throughout the hospital, Sarah noticed a change in how people treated her. Doctors listened more carefully when she expressed concerns about patients. Administrators included her in discussions about hospital security and crisis protocols. Other nurses sought her advice on handling difficult situations, but perhaps the most meaningful change was in how Sarah saw herself. For years, she had internalized the phrase "just a nurse" as a limitation. She had accepted that her role was important but somehow secondary to the doctors and administrators around her. Now she understood that being just a nurse meant being the person who spent the most time with patients, who noticed changes in their condition, who provided comfort during frightening moments, and who sometimes stood between them and disaster. It meant being trained not just in medical procedures, but in human psychology, crisis management, and the art of healing that went beyond medicine. 3 months after the incident, Sarah received a letter that surprised her. It was from Marcus, written from the halfway house where he was completing his sentence. "Dear Sarah," the letter began, "I wanted you to know that I'm doing much better. My back is healing and I'm working with a counselor to deal with the problems that led me to make such a terrible decision that day. But most importantly, I wanted to thank you for seeing me as a human being when I couldn't even see myself that way. You probably don't remember this, but when I was being taken away that day, you told me that nurses don't give up on people. That's something I think about every day now. It reminds me not to give up on myself. I have a job lined up for when I get out, something in maintenance that won't hurt my back. I have a small apartment waiting for me. I'm even thinking about taking some classes to learn about crisis counseling. So maybe I can help other people who feel as lost and desperate as I did. I know I can never undo the fear I caused that day, but I hope I can spend the rest of my life proving that people can change when someone believes in them. You're not just a nurse, Sarah. You're the kind of person who makes the world a better place. Thank you for saving my life in more ways than one." The letter was signed simply, Marcus Williams, forever grateful. Sarah kept that letter in her locker at work, and whenever she had a particularly difficult day, she would read it to remind herself why she had chosen nursing as her career. 6 months later, Sarah was promoted to charge nurse of the emergency department. During her first staff meeting in her new role, she addressed the phrase that had followed her throughout her career. "I know that people sometimes refer to us as just nurses," she told the assembled staff. "I've heard it countless times, and I know you have too. But I want you to remember something. There is nothing just about what we do. We are the guardians of hope in people's darkest moments. We are the bridge between fear and healing. We are the proof that compassion is just as important as medicine. Never let anyone make you feel like you're just anything. You are nurses, and that means you have the power to save lives, comfort families, and sometimes change the world in 7 seconds." As Sarah looked around the room at her colleagues, men and women who had chosen a profession dedicated to helping others, she felt a deep sense of pride. They weren't just nurses. They were exactly what the world needed them to be: healers, advocates, and guardians of human dignity. And Sarah Martinez, who had once been dismissed as just a nurse, had proven that sometimes the most ordinary people are capable of the most extraordinary acts of courage and compassion. The phrase would follow her throughout her career, but it would never diminish her again. Because Sarah had learned that being just a nurse was actually everything.